The aroma of roasted chicken filled the air as Ethan Moore stepped into Ryan Anderson's suburban home in Brooklyn. The house exuded warmth, with laughter emanating from the dining room where Ryan's wife, Emily, was setting the table. Ethan couldn't help but admire the idyllic scene. Ryan's 2 children, Lily and Josh, chasing each other around the living room, their giggles harmonizing with the faint hum of a jazz record spinning in the background. "Ethan," Ryan called from the kitchen, his voice jovial as he carried 2 glasses of whiskey. "Get in here. We've got stories to tell, and I'm not letting you off easy tonight." Ethan grinned, shrugging off his jacket and hanging it by the door. "You make it sound like I'm the one who messed up on our last mission," he quipped, stepping into the warm light of the kitchen. Emily greeted him with a hug, a motherly affection in her demeanor. "Dinner will be ready soon. Don't let him pull you into too much trouble, Ethan." "I'll do my best, Emily," Ethan replied with a laugh, taking the offered whiskey. The meal that followed was a symphony of comfort and camaraderie. Between bites of perfectly seasoned chicken, Ethan and Ryan regaled Emily with tales of their exploits in the NYPD's SWAT division. Their bond was evident, forged through years of shared danger and trust. "Remember that warehouse raid?" Ethan said, shaking his head. "You almost got us blown to pieces, Ryan." "Details," Ryan retorted, raising his glass. "It worked out, didn't it?" As the laughter subsided, Ryan's tone grew serious. "Ethan, I've been working on something big. The Sombra Negra cartel. We've been tracking them for months. I think I'm close to a breakthrough." Ethan frowned, his instincts sharpening. "Close how?" Ryan hesitated, glancing at Emily, who was distracted by the kids. "They've got a distribution hub in the Bronx. If I can get inside, I might uncover enough to dismantle their entire operation." Ethan leaned in, lowering his voice. "You're not thinking of going in alone, are you?" "I don't have a choice," Ryan replied. "I can't involve the team without solid intel. Besides, it's just surveillance." "Just surveillance," Ethan echoed, skeptical. "Ryan, don't play the hero. We're stronger together." Ryan raised his glass in a mock toast. "Noted, partner." 2 days later, the peaceful veneer of their lives was shattered. Ryan was driving home from a late meeting, the city's dim streetlights casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. He noticed the black SUV in his rearview mirror a block away, its darkened windows an ominous presence. His training kicked in immediately. He turned left onto a narrower street, watching as the SUV followed. A chill settled in his chest. He accelerated, weaving through the residential area in an attempt to lose his pursuers. The SUV mirrored his every move. The road ahead ended in a cul-de-sac. Cursing under his breath, Ryan slammed the brakes and reached for his weapon. Before he could act, the SUV skidded to a stop, and 3 men emerged, their faces obscured by ski masks. Ryan threw open his door, his instincts screaming for action. The first attacker lunged, and Ryan met him with a swift elbow to the jaw, followed by a takedown that left the man gasping on the asphalt. He pivoted just in time to block the second assailant, landing a brutal knee strike to the ribs. He barely saw the third man before the blow landed. Something heavy struck the back of his head, and the world blurred into a haze of pain. Ryan staggered, trying to regain his footing, but the attackers overwhelmed him. They wrestled him to the ground, zip-tying his wrists before shoving him into the SUV. Hours later, the video emerged. Ethan was at the SWAT headquarters, reviewing routine reports, when his phone buzzed. The message was a link to an untraceable video. Clicking it, his blood ran cold. The image showed Ryan, bound to a chair in a dimly lit room, his face battered but defiant. Behind him stood Marco Salgado, the infamous leader of the Sombra Negra cartel. His presence radiated cold menace, his calm demeanor belying the brutality he commanded. Marco's voice was smooth, almost conversational. To the officers who think they own these streets, respect them or the streets will own you. This is your warning. Obey or bleed. He stepped closer to the camera, his dark eyes locking onto the lens. Captain Anderson's life depends on your silence. Any attempt to intervene will result in his death. The video ended abruptly, leaving Ethan staring at the screen, his fists clenched. His mind raced with questions. How had this happened? What had Ryan uncovered to make him a target? A sharp knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Emily burst into the room, her face pale and tear-streaked. Ethan, they have him. What are you going to do? How are you going to save him? Ethan stood, placing his hands firmly on her shoulders. Emily, listen to me. I won't let them hurt him. Ryan is family. We'll bring him back. Her voice cracked with desperation. But what if they're faster? What if we're already too late? Ethan's resolve hardened. I've never left a man behind. Not now, not ever. Emily nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. Promise me. I promise, Ethan said, his voice steel. He turned to his team, his mind already calculating the steps ahead. There was no margin for error. Ryan's life depended on it. The SWAT headquarters was a hive of barely contained tension. Agents who were usually focused and composed now moved with hurried determination. The abduction of Ryan Anderson, one of their own, had thrown the team into uncharted territory. Ethan Moore stood at the center of the storm, his expression unreadable as he studied the video of Ryan on a loop. Every detail mattered. The angle of the camera, the shadows on the walls, the faint echoes of ambient noise. Somewhere within those frames was a clue to Ryan's location, and Ethan was determined to find it. Ethan, barked Tom Garcia, one of the senior officers. He strode across the room, his stance rigid with barely concealed frustration. We've been combing the video for hours. What's the plan? Or are we just spinning our wheels? Ethan turned to face him, his voice steady but firm. The plan is to bring Ryan back alive, Tom. But we don't move until we're sure. One wrong step, and it's over. Tom's jaw tightened. With all due respect, you're thinking with your heart, not your head. The cartel isn't going to wait for us to get our act together. Ethan stepped closer, his tone hardening. If it were you in that chair, I'd be doing the same thing. Now follow my orders, or step aside. The tension between them was palpable, but Tom relented with a sharp nod, retreating to his station. Ethan shifted his focus to the rest of the team. He had already ordered intensive drills, simulating worst-case scenarios with ruthless precision. In the training room, agents practiced combat techniques in pairs, their grunts of effort echoing off the walls. Ethan entered the room and observed silently for a moment, his eyes scanning for weaknesses in form or focus. "Stop," he called, clapping his hands sharply. The agents froze mid-action. Ethan stepped forward, gesturing to one of the officers, a younger recruit named Daniels. "Come here." Daniels hesitated but complied, stepping into the center of the room. Ethan tossed him a rubber training knife. "Attack me," Ethan commanded. Daniels blinked. "Sir, you heard me. Attack." The room fell silent as Daniels lunged. Ethan moved with the fluidity of a seasoned fighter, deflecting the blade and disarming Daniels in a single motion. He twisted the recruit's arm behind his back and pressed the knife to his neck, ending the demonstration in under 5 seconds. "The cartel doesn't play fair," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "They don't hesitate, and neither can you. If you're not ready to fight for your life, you won't make it out there. Train like it's real." The agents exchanged uneasy glances but nodded, their resolve hardening. As the team prepared, Ethan turned to an unlikely source for help, Mia Torres. A former member of the Sombra Negra cartel, Mia had turned informant years ago after losing her family to their violence. Ethan found her in a dingy apartment in Queens, where she lived under constant fear of retribution. Mia answered the door cautiously, her eyes narrowing when she saw Ethan. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "We need your help," Ethan said bluntly. "Ryan's been taken by the cartel. You know how they operate. You know their weak points." Mia crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You think I'm just going to walk back into hell for you? They'll kill me, and my sister. You don't understand what they're capable of." Ethan stepped closer, his tone softening but remaining resolute. "I know exactly what they're capable of, Mia. That's why I need you. You've seen what they do to families. You've lived it. Help us stop them, and I promise your sister will be safe." She laughed bitterly. "You're making promises you can't keep. Just like you promised to save your friend? He's probably already dead." The words cut deep, but Ethan held his ground. "Ryan's alive, and we're bringing him back. You can either be part of that, or you can let the cartel keep winning. Your call." Mia studied him for a long moment before sighing. "If I do this, I want protection for my sister. Real protection." "You have my word," Ethan said. "And this time, I'll keep it." Mia's information proved invaluable. She revealed the location of a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, one of the cartel's primary hubs. Blueprints of the building showed a maze of storage rooms and narrow corridors, perfect for an ambush but also a logistical nightmare for a rescue mission. Back at headquarters, the team gathered around the table, poring over the plans. Ethan took charge, pointing to key areas on the map. "The main entrance is too obvious," he said. "They'll be expecting us there." We split into two teams. One creates a diversion at the front, the other breaches from the east side. "Tom, you'll lead the diversion team." Tom raised an eyebrow. "And you?" "I'm leading the breach," Ethan replied. "Ryan's life depends on precision. I'm not leaving anything to chance." As the meeting concluded, Mia lingered, her arms crossed. "You're walking into a trap, you know," she said. "The cartel doesn't just let people go." "We're not asking for permission," Ethan replied. "We're taking him back." Mia smirked, but there was a hint of admiration in her eyes. "Good luck, then. You'll need it." The night before the operation, Ethan sat alone in the armory, inspecting his gear. Each piece of equipment was checked and rechecked, a ritual that steadied his nerves. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but he refused to let it break him. Emily's voice echoed in his mind. "Promise me." He whispered to himself, a quiet vow in the dimly lit room. "I won't fail." As the clock struck midnight, the team assembled, their faces set with grim determination. This was no ordinary mission. This was personal. They moved out in silence, the hum of the armored vehicles the only sound breaking the stillness of the night. The stage was set, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Ethan knew the risks, but he also knew one thing for certain. They were coming for Ryan, and nothing would stand in their way. The moon hung low over the city, casting silvery light on the SWAT team's convoy as it rumbled toward the outskirts of the Bronx. The target was an unassuming warehouse nestled between rows of abandoned buildings, its nondescript exterior belying the chaos brewing inside. Ethan Moore sat in the lead vehicle, his jaw tight, his mind racing with contingencies. Every instinct screamed caution. This wouldn't be easy. "Team 1, take positions," Ethan ordered into his radio as they approached. "Team 2, prepare to breach on my signal." Tom Garcia's voice came through the comms. "Diversion team ready." Ethan adjusted the strap of his bulletproof vest, his gaze fixed on the warehouse. It loomed ahead, an ominous structure with dim lights flickering through its shattered windows. From their reconnaissance, they knew it was heavily guarded, and there was no room for error. Inside the warehouse, Marco Salgado's men patrolled with military precision. Each step echoed through the cavernous space, the metallic clink of firearms a constant reminder of the stakes. Crates were stacked high, containing everything from illicit drugs to high-powered weapons. The air was thick with tension, a volatile atmosphere that could ignite with the slightest provocation. In a back room, Ryan Anderson sat bound to a chair, his head hanging low. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple, but his eyes burned with defiance. One of the guards leaned in close, sneering. "Your friends won't come for you. And even if they do, they'll die trying." Ryan smirked, despite the pain. "Then you don't know my friends." Ethan raised a hand, signaling Team 1 to initiate the diversion. A carefully timed explosion rocked the front entrance, sending a plume of smoke and debris into the night sky. Alarms blared, and the guards scrambled to respond. "Move in," Ethan barked, leading Team 2 toward the east entrance. The breach was swift. A hydraulic battering ram smashed through the reinforced door, and the team stormed inside, weapons raised. The interior was a labyrinth of crates and corridors, every corner a potential ambush. "Clear right," Ethan whispered, scanning the shadows. The first gunshot cracked through the air, shattering the silence. A hail of bullets followed, forcing the team to take cover behind a row of crates. Ethan's heart pounded as he assessed the situation. "Daniels, flank left." "Garcia, lay suppressing fire," he commanded. Daniels moved with practiced precision, his footsteps muffled against the concrete floor. He emerged on the enemy's flank, dispatching 2 guards with precise shots. Garcia's firepower kept the remaining hostiles pinned down, allowing Ethan to press forward. As Ethan rounded a corner, 2 cartel members lunged at him, one wielding a knife, the other swinging a crowbar. He dropped his rifle and engaged them hand to hand. The first attacker slashed wildly, but Ethan sidestepped, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting until the knife clattered to the ground. A swift elbow strike to the jaw left him unconscious. The second man swung the crowbar with brutal force, but Ethan ducked, delivering a punishing uppercut that sent his opponent sprawling. Before the man could recover, Ethan secured him with a zip tie, his breathing ragged but steady. In another part of the warehouse, Tom's diversion team encountered resistance. The guards, realizing the attack was a coordinated assault, regrouped and retaliated with ferocity. Tom ducked behind a steel pillar as bullets ricocheted around him. "Ethan, they're digging in." Tom's voice crackled through the radio. "We've got heavy resistance here." Ethan responded swiftly. "Hold your position. We're closing in." But trouble was brewing within their own ranks. Derek, one of the SWAT officers, had been acting strangely throughout the mission, his movements hesitant, his gaze avoiding his teammates. Ethan didn't have time to dwell on it, until he found Derek in a secluded corner, speaking into a concealed earpiece. "Drop it, Derek," Ethan commanded, his weapon trained on the man. Derek froze, then turned slowly, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "You don't understand, Ethan." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Ethan growled. "You've been feeding them intel." "They threatened my family," Derek said, his voice shaking. "I didn't have a choice." Ethan's finger hovered over the trigger. Ryan didn't have a choice either. And now he's paying for it. "Do you think they'll spare you? You're a loose end." Derek's resolve crumbled, and he dropped his earpiece. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Ethan cuffed him, his anger simmering just below the surface. "You're done." Pushing forward, Ethan's team found themselves in a storage area rigged with explosives. The cartel had prepared for such an assault, and one wrong step could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. Ethan crouched low, carefully examining the makeshift detonators. "Watch your footing," he warned the team. "One tripwire, and this whole place goes up." Navigating the minefield required precision and nerves of steel. Ethan disabled several devices, his hands steady despite the tension. Behind him, Daniels muttered, "This place is a death trap." "That's why we're getting Ryan out of here," Ethan replied without looking back. Finally, they reached the back room where Ryan was being held. Ethan signaled for silence, then positioned his team for a coordinated breach. With a single nod, they burst through the door. The guards inside reacted instantly, opening fire. The room erupted into chaos as bullets tore through the air. Ethan dove behind a metal table, returning fire with deadly accuracy. He took down 2 guards before charging toward Ryan, who shouted, "Behind you!" Ethan spun just in time to block a guard's attack. They grappled fiercely, the guard's strength nearly overpowering Ethan. But with a surge of adrenaline, Ethan twisted free and delivered a punishing blow to the man's temple. He turned to Ryan, cutting through the ropes that bound him. "We've got to move." Ryan staggered to his feet, his movements sluggish from the ordeal. "They're not going to let us just walk out of here." "Good," Ethan said, his voice cold. "I'm not done with them yet." As the team fought their way out, a deafening explosion shook the warehouse. The cartel, realizing they were losing, had triggered their contingency plan. Flames licked at the walls, and smoke filled the air. "Move! Move!" Ethan shouted, guiding Ryan and the team toward the exit. They emerged into the night just as the warehouse collapsed in a fiery inferno. The mission wasn't a total loss. They had rescued Ryan and secured crucial intel, but the cost was high. Derek's betrayal, the injuries sustained, and the lingering threat of the cartel weighed heavily on them all. Back at headquarters, Ryan sat in the infirmary, his wounds being treated. He looked at Ethan, his voice rough but resolute. "This isn't over." Ethan nodded, his eyes hard. "Not by a long shot." The air in the SWAT headquarters was thick with unspoken tension. The operation to extract Ryan had left scars, physically on the team and emotionally on the trust that bound them. Derek's betrayal weighed heavily on Ethan Moore, even as he prepared for the next stage in their battle against the Sombra Negra cartel. There was no time for second-guessing or regret. The cartel wasn't retreating, and neither could they. Ethan's focus sharpened as new intelligence poured in, much of it thanks to Mia Torres. The former cartel operative now worked against her former allies, her information a lifeline for the team. But Mia's face betrayed her unease. Ethan noticed as she hesitated before speaking during a briefing. "What is it, Mia?" he asked, his tone direct but not unkind. She leaned forward, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of a map spread across the table. "Marco Salgado isn't going to wait for you to make the next move. He'll retaliate, and he knows exactly where to hit you. He'll go for your family, your team, anyone you care about." The room fell silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. His wife, Sarah, and their 2 young daughters were his anchor in a life filled with chaos. The thought of them being in danger sent a chill down his spine. "Let him try," Ethan said, his voice cold and determined. "But we're striking first. What else do you have for us?" Mia sighed, her dark eyes heavy with the weight of her choice to help. "They're moving Ryan's replacement target, a shipment of weapons, through the docks tomorrow night. Marco will be there personally to oversee the deal. It's your best chance to take him down." Ethan's team exchanged glances. The docks were an open killing field. The risks were monumental. Tom Garcia, still smarting from the fallout of Derek's betrayal, broke the silence. It's a trap. You know that, right? Ethan nodded. Of course it is. But we don't have the luxury of waiting for a safer option. Marco's not leaving that doc alive. Meanwhile, Ryan was recovering in the infirmary. Bruised but unbroken, he watched Ethan through the glass wall of the command center. He recognized the weight his friend was carrying. "Mind if I join?" Ryan asked, stepping into the room. Ethan shook his head. "You should be resting." Ryan grinned, his face a mask of defiance. "Resting won't stop Marco. I'm in this, Ethan. You're not going after him without me." Ethan studied his friend for a moment before relenting. "Fine. But no heroics. We stick to the plan." That evening, Mia took a more dangerous step than any she'd ever taken. To ensure the operation's success, she volunteered to infiltrate the cartel once more. Her return to the lion's den wasn't just a gamble, it was a death sentence if she was discovered. Ethan and Ryan escorted her to a safe house where she changed into cartel-appropriate attire. Sleek, dark clothes that spoke of power and danger. "You sure about this?" Ryan asked, concern etched into his face. Mia smirked, though it didn't reach her eyes. "You boys aren't the only ones with something to prove." As she stepped out of the car and disappeared into the shadows of the city, Ethan's chest tightened. They had all made their choices, but the weight of hers felt immeasurable. At the cartel's hideout, Mia's arrival drew suspicious stares. Marco Salgado was in his office, surrounded by armed guards and a haze of cigar smoke. He greeted her with a slow, predatory smile. "Mia," he drawled, leaning back in his chair. "I thought you were smarter than to come back. What brings you home?" She forced a sly grin. "You know how it is, Marco. Business is better when you're with the winning side. And I heard you've been winning." Marco's eyes narrowed, his instincts screaming for caution. "Prove it," he said, gesturing to a burly man standing near the door. "Luis here thinks you're a traitor. Fight him. Convince me otherwise." The room fell silent as Mia stepped into the makeshift ring. Luis towered over her, a brute with fists like sledgehammers. But Mia was fast. As he lunged, she dodged, delivering a sharp elbow to his jaw. He recovered quickly, swinging wildly. The fight was brutal, each blow landing with bone-jarring force. Finally, Mia used his weight against him, flipping him onto his back and locking his arm in a punishing hold until he tapped out. Marco clapped slowly, his smile returning. "You've still got it. Welcome back." Mia masked her relief, knowing her position was precarious. Over the next few hours, she gathered intel, subtly questioning the other members about the shipment. She confirmed the docks were a trap but learned of a weak point in their defenses, a blind spot in the surveillance system Ethan could exploit. Back at SWAT headquarters, Ethan received Mia's update. The tension in the room was palpable as they finalized their plan. "We hit hard and fast," Ethan said, outlining the strategy on a digital map. "Ryan and I will take the east flank. Tom, you and your team cover the west. Mia's blind spot is here." He tapped the screen. "It's our way in." Tom nodded but couldn't resist a dig. "Let's hope your informant isn't playing both sides again." Ethan's glare silenced him. "She's risking everything for this. Don't forget that." As the clock neared midnight, the SWAT convoy moved toward the docks. The atmosphere inside the vehicles was electric, a mixture of adrenaline and grim resolve. Ryan adjusted his gear, his movements methodical despite the weight of what lay ahead. "You ready for this?" Ethan asked, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Always," Ryan replied, his tone steady. They reached the docks, the moonlight glinting off the water. The scene was eerily quiet, the stillness broken only by the lapping of waves against the hulls of rusted ships. Ethan gave the signal, and the teams moved into position. The faint glow of lanterns marked the cartel's meeting point, a cluster of shipping containers arranged like a fortress. Mia's intel proved accurate. The blind spot allowed Ethan's team to slip past the first layer of guards. They crept forward, their footsteps muffled on the concrete. Then, all hell broke loose. A shout rang out, followed by the crack of gunfire. The cartel had spotted Tom's team on the west flank. The quiet night erupted into chaos as bullets tore through the air. Ethan and Ryan pushed forward, their movements synchronized, a well-oiled machine in the face of danger. They reached the heart of the operation, where Mako stood amidst a group of heavily armed men. His eyes locked onto Ethan, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Captain Moore," Mako called, his voice dripping with mockery. "Welcome to my kingdom. I hope you're ready to bleed." Ethan leveled his weapon. "Not tonight." As the battle raged around them, Ethan and Mako stared each other down, knowing this fight was far from over. The docks erupted into a cacophony of violence and chaos. The SWAT teams moved like shadows, their formation tight as they faced a storm of bullets from the cartel. The sound of automatic gunfire echoed across the water, mingling with shouts and the occasional explosion from grenades tossed in desperation. Ethan Moore and Ryan Anderson pressed forward through the fray, their movements synchronized as they covered each other. Ethan's voice cut through the noise as he barked orders into his comms. "Tom, hold your flank. Daniels, suppressing fire on the left. We're moving to the center." Ryan, still bruised from his captivity but filled with grim determination, fired precise shots that felled enemies with ruthless efficiency. "They're converging on the containers ahead," he shouted over the gunfire. "Mako's got to be there." Ethan nodded, signaling for his team to regroup. "Push forward. Stay low and watch for tripwires." Mia Torres crouched behind a rusting forklift, her chest heaving as she reloaded her pistol. Her re-entry into the cartel had allowed her to guide the SWAT teams into the heart of the operation, but now her cover was completely blown. She had taken out one of Marco's lieutenants when he realized her betrayal, and now every cartel gunman seemed to have her in their sights. The shouts in Spanish around her confirmed it. "Find Torres. She dies tonight." A guard spotted her, raising his rifle, but Mia fired first, the shot dropping him instantly. She sprinted toward a stack of shipping containers, the sound of bullets pinging off the metal as she ran. She ducked into an open container, her breath ragged, and activated her radio. "Ethan, they're closing in on me. I'll try to keep them busy, but you've got a small window to take Marco." "Understood," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "Get out alive, Mia." The SWAT teams advanced methodically, clearing every corner with precision. Tom Garcia's team flanked from the west, drawing cartel fire and keeping their sharpshooters pinned down. The air was thick with smoke from incendiary grenades, and visibility was low, but their training prevailed. As Ethan and Ryan approached the center of the docks, they encountered a barricade of steel drums and crates. Behind it, a group of cartel enforcers waited, heavily armed and prepared to make their stand. "They're dug in," Ryan said, ducking behind cover. "We need to flush them out." Ethan glanced around, spotting a stack of fuel canisters nearby. "I've got an idea. Cover me." Before Ryan could protest, Ethan grabbed a grenade from his vest and sprinted toward the canisters. Gunfire erupted around him, the cartel enforcers realizing his intent. Bullets tore into the ground at his feet, but Ethan moved with practiced agility, pulling the pin and lobbing the grenade. The explosion was deafening. A fireball erupted, engulfing the barricade and forcing the cartel members to scatter. Ethan dove back behind cover as the debris rained down, the path now clear. "You're insane," Ryan muttered, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You're welcome," Ethan shot back. Meanwhile, Marco Salgado stood on an elevated platform overseeing the chaos. His expression was unreadable, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the pandemonium below. He barked orders to his remaining men, his voice cold and authoritative. "Hold the line. Keep them distracted while we finish the transfer." Behind him, a black SUV idled near a shipping container loaded with crates of weapons. Marco's escape plan was in motion, but he wasn't leaving until he was sure the SWAT teams were sufficiently bloodied. He turned to one of his lieutenants, his tone venomous. "If Torres is still alive, make her the priority. She dies tonight." Ethan and Ryan reached the platform just as Marco's men began retreating toward the SUV. Ryan spotted Marco immediately, his figure unmistakable in the chaos. "There!" he shouted, breaking into a run. Ethan followed, his rifle raised. Marco's men opened fire, forcing the two to split up. Ryan engaged one guard in brutal close-quarters combat, disarming him with a swift elbow strike and slamming him against the container. Ethan took down another with a well-placed shot before reaching the base of the platform. Marco turned, spotting Ethan as he ascended the stairs. A smirk spread across his face. "Captain Moore," he said, drawing a large combat knife. "You've come a long way to die." Ethan didn't respond. He charged forward, ducking under Marco's first swing and countering with a punch to the ribs. Marco retaliated with a savage kick, sending Ethan stumbling back. The two men circled each other, their movements predatory. Ethan's training was unmatched, but Marco fought with raw ferocity, every move aimed to kill. They exchanged blows, the fight brutal and unrelenting. Marco lunged with the knife, grazing Ethan's shoulder. The pain was sharp, but Ethan gritted his teeth and used the opening to land a devastating punch to Marco's jaw. The cartel leader staggered but didn't fall, his resolve as unyielding as his grip on the blade. "I respect your tenacity," Marco sneered, wiping blood from his lip. "But it won't save you." Ethan blocked another strike, twisting Marco's wrist and forcing the knife to clatter to the ground. Seizing the moment, Ethan delivered a powerful knee to Marco's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. As Marco fell to his knees, Ethan aimed his rifle at his head. "It's over," he said, his voice low and steady. Marco laughed, his defiance unbroken. "It's never over, Captain. Cut one head, and two more will take its place." Before Ethan could respond, Ryan appeared, dragging a wounded but alive Mia. "Ethan, we've got to move. Reinforcements are inbound." Ethan hesitated for a moment before securing Marco with zip ties. "You're coming with us," he said, hauling the cartel leader to his feet. The SWAT teams exfiltrated under heavy fire, the remaining cartel forces desperately trying to recover their leader. Explosions lit up the night as the docks became a battlefield, but the team held their ground. As the convoy sped away, Ethan looked back at the burning docks, his grip tightening on his rifle. Marco sat in the vehicle, bloodied but smirking. "You've won nothing," Marco said, his voice dripping with malice. Ethan didn't respond, but his mind was already calculating the next move. This fight wasn't over. Not yet. The sun rose over the city, casting a muted glow over the SWAT headquarters. The air inside was heavy, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The team had survived the ambush at the docks, and Marco Salgado, the enigmatic leader of the Sombra Negra cartel, was now in custody. But the victory felt hollow. The cartel's network still loomed large, and the cost of the operation weighed on them all. Ethan Moore sat in the debriefing room, nursing a cup of coffee. His shoulder was bandaged from the knife wound he had sustained during the fight with Marco, but the pain barely registered. Across the table, Ryan Anderson leaned back in his chair, his face bruised but defiant. "Well," Ryan said, breaking the silence, "we got the bastard." "That's something." Ethan nodded but didn't smile. It's not over. Marco's people will be looking for revenge. They'll want to make an example out of us for taking him down. Ryan frowned, but before he could respond, Tom Garcia entered the room, holding a thick file. Intel just came in from Mia, Tom said, dropping the file onto the table. The cartel's scrambling. Marco's capture hit them hard, but they're not folding. If anything, they're doubling down. Ethan flipped through the file, his jaw tightening as he scanned the details. Arms deals, drug shipments, and violent retribution against perceived traitors. It was clear the cartel wasn't going quietly. We'll deal with it, Ethan said, his voice firm. But right now, we need to make sure Marco stays locked up. In the interrogation room, Marco sat chained to a metal table, his expression a mix of arrogance and amusement. His smirk widened as Ethan entered, his presence filling the small room. "Ah, Captain Moore," Marco drawled. "Come to gloat? Or maybe to ask for my wisdom on how to dismantle my empire?" Ethan ignored the taunt, pulling out a chair and sitting across from Marco. "Your empire's crumbling, Salgado. Your men are scattering, your resources are compromised, and your name is mud on the streets." Marco chuckled, his dark eyes gleaming. "You think you've won? You don't understand the game. Lock me up, kill me, it doesn't matter. Someone else will rise. That's the nature of power." Ethan leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You're right. Someone else will try to fill the void. But we'll take them down too. And if you think I won't do whatever it takes to bury every last one of you, you don't know me." Marco's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "We'll see, Captain. We'll see." The trial of Marco Salgado became a media sensation. His crimes, ranging from drug trafficking to murder, dominated headlines, and the courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers. Ethan and Ryan testified, their accounts painting a damning picture of the cartel's brutality. Emily Anderson sat in the gallery, clutching Ryan's hand tightly as the verdict was read. "Guilty on all charges," the judge declared. The courtroom erupted in whispers, but Ethan remained stoic. It was a victory, but not a final one. Marco's imprisonment was a blow to the cartel, but the fight against its sprawling network was far from over. Back at headquarters, the team gathered for a subdued celebration. A few beers were cracked open, and smiles were exchanged, but the atmosphere was far from jubilant. The scars of the mission, physical and emotional, lingered. Mia Torres stood apart from the group, nursing a drink. Her contributions had been vital, but the price of her involvement weighed heavily on her. Ethan approached, his expression softening. "You did good out there," he said. Mia scoffed. "Did I? My sister's in protective custody. I'm a walking target, and I've burned every bridge I had left. But yeah, sure, I did good." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You gave us a chance to fight back. That matters." Mia looked at him, her eyes filled with weariness and gratitude. "Take care of yourself, Moore. And don't get yourself killed chasing this dragon." As the team dispersed, Ethan drove home, the quiet hum of the engine his only companion. When he pulled into the driveway, the sight of his wife, Sarah, waiting on the porch brought a rare smile to his face. She met him halfway, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "You're late," she teased, though her voice trembled with relief. "I'm here now," Ethan said, holding her close. Inside, their daughters were waiting, their laughter filling the house. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted, replaced by the warmth of family. A week later, Ethan and Ryan sat on the back patio of Ryan's home. Emily brought out a tray of drinks, and the two men shared a quiet toast. "To survival," Ryan said, raising his glass. Ethan smirked. "To the next battle." They clinked glasses, the sound ringing out like a promise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in shades of gold and crimson, the two friends sat in companionable silence. They had faced the storm and come out the other side, scarred but unbroken. The fight against the cartel would continue, but for now they allowed themselves a moment of peace, a fleeting reprieve before the world called them back into the fray. If you enjoyed the story and want to see more content like this, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and turning on notifications.